Hello, everybody. Welcome to 10 Basic Steps. I'm April Martin, and I have Cody Sutton with me here tonight from Stonewater Financial Planning. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do and things that I have coming up. But just so you know, we are in webinar mode. We cannot see or hear you. However, I will make sure that the chat is enabled here in a moment to make sure that you can paste your questions and your comments there. And I'll be watching those and letting Cody know throughout the presentation so that we'll be able to have a conversation with you that way. This will be recorded and it will be placed on our website along with the slide decks. And I should have that up in 2 or 3 days. All right, well, thank you so much for being here tonight, Cody.
Definitely.
All right, so my next webinar that I have coming up is with Texoma Swim Academy. I have Christy Baca who will be here. She does inclusive swimming and has several certifications to do adaptive swimming with people with special needs. And I think it'll be a great webinar and we'll learn a lot about water safety. And if you'd like to register for that, you can scan the QR code. This is coming up April 16th at 10 a.m. And again, I will record that and put it on the website with the slide deck. If you're not able to attend, just go ahead and register. And that way you'll get a copy sent to you in your email. Any of the webinars that I've done previously are stored here on our website. And I am the Hireability Navigator for Grayson, Cook, and Fannin counties. I work to promote vocational rehabilitation and workforce solution services. And what we do is we try to find a life plan that looks good for a client to enable them to get a job, to maintain a job, or even increase in their skills and move on to a different or better job. VR is available throughout the lifespan. We have adult services and student services. Student services are age 14 to 22. Adult services are all other ages. These are some examples of services. And for students, we do work with families. You're included in that if you're a parent. You're included in that process. Counselors often go to the schools and meet with the parents and the students if the parents are able to make it, or they can also meet with you virtually sometimes as needed. If you do not know where your local vocational rehabilitation or workforce solutions office is, you can use these locator codes and they will help you find both. And you can always reach out to me and I'll have my contact information throughout the webinar and also at the end of the slide deck. These are other ways that you can connect with vocational rehabilitation. If you come to our workforce centers, we have them in Grayson, Cook, and Fannin counties, and they're available throughout the state. This is just my particular area. And again, those locators will help you find your office. Workforce solution offices are great in addition to vocational rehabilitation because many of the services you can do as a walk-in client, you can get help with resumes. And yes, this includes your students. There are computers there, there's assistive devices enabling you to be able to look for a job and research jobs, and also education and training. And there are several other programs that you can qualify for besides vocational rehabilitation. So be sure to check them out. This is just an example of the services that are offered through the Texoma workforce locations. Every area has a target occupation list. These are occupations within your board area. There are 28 in the state that are in high demand. So that means employers are willing to supplement or help pay for some of the training involved with those occupations. So before you go take out a loan and go to school for something or to get a certificate, you might want to check your workforce board to see if it's on a target occupation list and if you would qualify for assistive services with the finances with that. Again, this is how you find your Workforce Solutions Center. And if you'd like to get a hold of me or have follow-up resources, I have a Padlet and I put my presentations and my public speaking events on there and other webinars. And that concludes what I have. So I'm going to go ahead and let Cody share his. And we're excited to hear what you've got tonight, Cody.
Perfect. Thank you, April. Let me, oh, if I can get this shared. Okay, can you see that okay now, April?
I can.
All right, perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you guys all again for jumping on tonight. I know it's getting late in the afternoon, and if you guys are like us, we're looking at a little bit of rain headed our way. So for better or worse, hopefully not too bad of storms. But so my name's Cody Sutton. I am with Stonewater Financial and Special Care Planning. Really our firm primarily focuses on working with families with special needs to kind of really help create what we call a life plan for the family. Everything from very early on, getting on things like the interest lists, all the way to kind of that legacy planning side. And a lot of that we're going to cover today as we dive into what we call the 10 basic steps, going over all the different things you guys may have heard of, may not have heard of, but these are kind of the big things that families think about, I think, most of the time as we're talking about kind of that long-term planning for ourselves and our children. When I say that we work with families with special needs, it's something that is obviously very near and dear to my heart. So I have a brother with special needs, and that's what got me started in working with families like mine. And I also serve on the board of the ARC of Texas, which is one of the major advocacy groups, especially here in Texas, where there's kind of a big push for things like the interest list and things like that to hopefully one day be a little bit shorter. So. But we'll go ahead and dive right in. Like April said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Typically try to leave like 15 minutes at the end to try to go through all of the questions. But April, if you think there's one that's super important, or I kind of missed something, definitely feel free to stop me and read it out loud for us. So before we kind of get started, got a couple of things here that if you guys have never heard of or just want to kind of take another look at. Some important documents that we have. We'll start on the right-hand side here. This is going to be what's called the Texas Medicaid waiver programs, or interest lists. If you have not heard of these interest lists, it is very important that you either reach out to April or myself to get this information to understand what the interest lists are. Okay, essentially they're access to additional resources and therapies and all kinds of things that our families need, but there is a waiting list, and the bad news is that those waiting lists right now are anywhere from 18 to we're hearing closer to like 25 years long. Okay, and so that's why it's very important to get on those lists young. So again, if you haven't heard of them, don't really know what it is, let me know. I'll send you this. It's a free list you get on to get access to a lot of those resources that all of our families should be on. Okay. The other side is the letter of intent, which we'll dive a little bit more into here in a minute. But we can get you this as, just a document that you can have for your files, kind of as a guidebook for your family's life. But that we'll dive into here in the steps here in a minute. Main reason, we give this presentation is because what we found is we always, in so many words or less words, we always get kind of the same question from all of our families. And it's really, what happens when I'm not around? If I'm the parent or I'm the guardian, that kind of aching feeling of, hey, what is going to happen, to my child when I'm no longer here? And so through these steps, hopefully kind of helps you guys understand a little bit more and kind of see that, hey, there are things we can do. There are things that we can plan for, and all the things that we can put in place to make sure that we do have, a great, happy, successful life with, hopefully a little bit less worry once some of these things are in place. Okay. So step one, always seems kind of goofy of, just have a vision, have a plan. But, for a lot of us, having a plan for a family like ours, or not the quote unquote typical family, is a little bit different. Okay, a lot of families, as they're thinking about their life plan, it's okay, I've got to get my kids through college, I've got to get my retirement in place, and I hopefully can leave a legacy for my family or for my children. Okay, for our families, it's a little bit different. Okay, college may or may not be in the picture. Then it's, are our kids going to live with us for the rest of our lives? Are they going to live on their own? Are they going to live with friends? And then it's okay, hey, we want to step into retirement, but now we're planning on retirement not just for the two of us, we're planning on retirement for 3 people now, because we still need to care for our child. Okay, and then when we start looking at legacy planning and answering that question of what happens when I'm not here, we don't get to hope that we can leave a legacy. We really need to plan that we are leaving a legacy for our family, okay, or for our child. And so when we think about what is your vision, what does that future look like, that it's kind of a loaded question more than a typical family, because we're talking, hey, what are the medical treatments, transportation, education, employment, what does housing look like? All of those things, not just from your child's perspective, once they, get through college, but hey, what are all of those next steps and what do we need to be planning for? Okay, there's all kinds of great living facilities. If you're thinking of like a 29 acres or a Daymark or, something like that, which those are great places to live, where they can live, alongside their friends, but they typically come with a pretty hefty price tag too. Okay, so a lot of that planning needs to be done far in advance so we can make sure, hey, if that's the lifestyle that we want, we're able to achieve that. Okay, so kind of having that vision of what we want the future to look like for our child. Step two, you guys are kind of doing that by being here today. It's really building a team of professionals that you want to surround you to be able to answer any and all the questions that you might have. Okay, so typically that's going to look like a doctor or a counselor. Most of the time you're going to need to get like a special needs attorney involved in your situation, for whatever type of estate planning or anything is needed for the future, which we'll dive into here in a minute. And then a lot of times that includes adding in someone like our team or someone like us to dive into that financial picture that you're trying to build. Okay, and I would say that in all of these areas, you need to hire the right guidance or work with the right guidance as well. Okay, for example, the attorney. I know a lot of attorneys that are extremely good at what they do, but they do not understand how to write a special needs trust. Okay, so these aren't things that, hey, we could just, my cousin's an attorney, so he's going to write us a will. We need someone that specializes in these areas, because there are a lot of things that might throw off that picture that maybe just, Uncle Jimmy that has an estate planning firm, maybe he doesn't understand. Okay. Government benefits and government assistance. These are typically big pieces, and I could honestly sit on this slide for an hour and take a deep dive into especially SSI. So we'll stay a little bit high level today, but if you guys have any questions, again, throw it in the chat as we're going through this. But when we look at, okay, what is out there and what are things that can help us as we are building out our plan and building out our future, typically SSI is going to be kind of that number one tool that we are going to get access to. And what that is it's government assistance that we can get access to when our child turns 18. Okay. Now, some of our families can get SSI before 18, but that means we have to qualify from a household income and asset level. Okay, so for most families at age 18, and when the child turns 18, that is when the state sees them as their own individual person. Okay, so when we go to the Social Security office and try to apply for SSI or supplemental security income, we're not applying as a child or mom and dad and a child. We're applying for the child. Okay, so based on their work record, their income, their assets. All right. Now the SSI check this year, I think, is $965 or something around there. I can't remember the exact number, maybe $973, something like that. But that's a monthly check that comes in. Essentially, the best way to think of it is it's kind of split up into three portions. One is meant for housing, one portion is meant for food, and one portion is meant for miscellaneous, okay, deodorants, toothpaste, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, housing, rent, essentially. So that should be 1/3 of the check. I don't know where the government thinks we can find rent for, $320 a month, but that portion is essentially meant for rent. Okay, so when you go to apply for SSI, there's a lot of steps you need to take. If you're about to go through this process, let me know. We have kind of a guidebook on that as well. But one question that also always gets a lot of people is, does your child pay you rent? Most families would be like, no, my kid doesn't pay rent, they live with me. Well, if they live with you and they do not pay you rent, you're going to lose 1/3 of that SSI check, because that 1/3 was meant to go towards rent, and you just told SSI that you don't charge rent. Okay, so those are all, that's kind of little things that you need to be kind of aware of going into talk to SSI. Is they are their own individual person, that you need to charge rent, you need to have the account set up, all of those things. So, kind of don't go in blind. Let us know if you need kind of that guidebook or anything as a reference, but SSI is a huge piece. And for a lot of families, even if SSI or, that $900 a month isn't huge, one big thing that comes with SSI is going to be Medicaid. Okay, so that's our access to kind of the medical side that can be provided for our child. Okay, as long as we are receiving $1 of SSI, we qualify for Medicaid. Okay, and I say $1 because SSI is a system that is meant to be worked out of. Okay, so if we're trying to get our child into the workforce, we're trying to work a little bit here, a little bit there, and kind of build up to working full time. Just because we work 5 hours a week doing something and making a little bit of money doesn't mean that we automatically lose SSI and Medicaid, or that we shouldn't apply for it. Okay, because the way that it works, now there's a whole calculation, but the easiest way to think of it, for every dollar that you make, you're going to lose 50 cents of SSI. So if we make $200 in a month, our SSI check is going to go down by $100. Okay, that's, like I said, there's a little bit more math than that, but that's kind of the simplest way to think of it. So working our way off, or working a little bit while we're receiving SSI, is perfectly fine. The other thing we have to worry about, I said income and asset limit. The asset limit you got to keep your eye on for any accounts across the board for your child is going to be $2,000. Okay, if we have over $2,000, that's going to suspend our SSI check and suspend Medicaid. Okay, so just a couple.
Cody,
Yep.
I'm sorry, you do have one question that's applicable right now. Do you help people file for SSI and Medicaid, or do you know of services that do this for parents?
I will say we do not do it. We know some people that do it. I can get you guys in contact with them. I will say there's very few and far between the people that do it, just because it is a headache. It is not something easy to do. Now it is something that families can do on their own. Like, I don't want you guys to be scared to actually do it on your own, but it is kind of a headache to do. And I will say right now, the SSI office is backed up, last I heard, about 11 to 13 months. Okay, so we had someone applied right when their child was 18. Their child is now 19 and like a month old. They just got their SSI last month. Now, the good thing, SSI will back pay. So they'll go to when you filed it and they'll catch you all the way up. But, don't expect it to just be a, fill out a quick survey and then you're going to get the $965 a month. But yeah, if you need those resources, you guys, I'll put my email up at the end as well. You guys feel free to shoot me an email and just ask for that, and I can get that over to you. And then other public supports, these I would say just ask the SSI office when you're in there applying. But obviously there's SNAP benefits, some others that you can kind of get that go along with the SSI and Medicaid. Okay. The second piece of that, of SSI, is, and this is the one a lot of people don't really know about or understand, but when you as the parent step into retirement, so you step in, you start claiming your Social Security benefit, your child can also receive the DAC benefit, or the Disabled Adult Child Benefit. Okay, the difference in them getting the DAC benefit and SSI is, one, typically it's a pay raise. So they're getting half of your Social Security benefit, okay, which a lot of times is over that $963. But it also switches us from Medicaid to Medicare, which is a much better benefit in almost all cases. Okay, so we can make that switch when we as the parent either step into retirement or we pass away. Our child can also claim that benefit. But it's one thing to keep in mind, especially as you're looking at the planning for, you know, your future, your retirement, is that we could get a pay raise and an increase on Medicare or onto Medicare. Okay. I will put one side note there as well with Medicare. Almost 100% of the time, we'll say 99.9% of the time, when you try to shift from SSI to the DAC benefit and switch from Medicaid to Medicare, 99.9% of the time, you're going to get a denial the first time. Don't panic. It's somebody that's pushing a button and they saw that there was somebody came through trying to apply for Medicare and they were only 35 years old. So they just instantly hit the button that said no. They didn't look that, hey, it's tied to the DAC benefit, here is why, any of that. We just have to appeal and get that Medicare from that side. Okay, so just because you get denied the first time, don't panic. We appeal, we go back. It's very, very common. Okay.
Cody, we have another question. Is the
Oh.
$2,000 threshold per month or in total?
The $2,000 asset limit is in total. The only accounts that do not apply, which we'll dive into here in a second too, is going to be the ABLE account and the special needs trust. Okay, but any account other than the ABLE account that is directly in your child's name, so think a checking account, savings account, 401k, if they started working somewhere and they started the 401k, you know, if there's any, a 529 could also be negative for us. Any of those accounts that we've opened or set up, or hey, maybe we just throw all the birthday money in there. If that is over $2,000, that is going to be an issue. We need to find a way to get the money out, spend the money down, keep it below that $2,000. Okay, and that is just across the board. But yeah, great question. Great question. All right, I'm gonna keep going. Like I said, we'll answer more questions here at the end too if we need to. But fourth step, you know, really the big thing with Texas that we always joke about is, you know, we all love Texas, great state of Texas. The benefits for our families, if you guys have ever compared them to any other state, probably made you want to move, because we are, I think we actually moved from 48 to 49th place this past year on benefits that the state provides. Okay, so if you look anywhere like Colorado, New York, California, all those, they have a lot more government benefits that are provided than Texas. Okay, but with that, I will say that we also have families from New York, Colorado, and California that they come here and they are blown away by how good everything that is not government provided actually is. Okay, which it's kind of crazy to hear, but you know, you think of a government provided agency and you know, sometimes it's not the nicest. Well, they come here and they see some places and they're just like, this is absolutely incredible. I want my child to come here. But then they start looking at the waiver interest lists and, and the costs and everything like that. So, you know, that there is a balance, you know, I would say, you know, getting involved, finding, you know, nonprofits or advocacy groups just to get that additional support you might need. You know, obviously that's, again, what you guys are doing here. And that's, you know, why Workforce is such a good solution for us, is because it's a great resource for us to just have across the board. Legal structure and considerations. Again, this is the legal side is what's going to be very important as we start building out that kind of that life plan for our families. Okay, so letter of intent, while that's not a legally binding document, the letter of intent is a great tool that we're going to have. Again, I'll go into it in here in a second. At age 18, guardianship may be something that we need to dive into. You know, are we going to need guardianship, or should we look at supported decision making? All of those types of questions start coming up when our child turns 18 of, hey, is that something that we will need? wills, all of our powers, really everything that wraps into that estate planning side, making sure that when that time comes that either we're no longer here or we can't make a decision on our own, who is going to make that decision for us? Okay, kind of, best way to think of estate planning is who's controlling everything beyond the grave. That's where the trusts come in, that's where the special needs trusts come in. And then really just reviewing these, we say every 5 years at least. Not that you have to make changes, but at least reviewing it every 5 years so that and understand kind of, there may be some people that you thought were a great fit to go into the plan, but maybe they're not anymore. Maybe a friend fell apart that, hey, you don't want to put that on them now. Okay, so just making sure that we use the right attorneys to structure all of this the right way. Okay, one big thing that comes from working with the attorneys is going to be the special needs trust. Okay. The special needs trust, I would say kind of the easiest way to think about it is that is what is meant to replace you when you are no longer here. You as mom and dad, the special needs trust is meant to fill that gap. Okay, so right now you are taking them to and from where they need to go. You're the transportation. If they need anything above and beyond what the government's going to pay for, you are doing that instantly. Everything that you just take for granted as mom and dad, that's what that trust is meant to step in and provide. Okay. So, there's good and bad, obviously, with the special needs trusts, and it's, comes down to a lot of the limitations, I would say, that are on the special needs trust. One limitation there is that the special needs trust cannot pay rent. Okay, because the SSI check and things like that are meant to pay for rent. So essentially it's seen that, hey, if the trust can pay for rent, it can pay for all the other things the government's paying for. So it's written into the trust that it cannot pay for that rent. Okay. Now, special needs trust versus ABLE account. The ABLE account, if you guys haven't heard of it, stands for Achieving a Better Living Experience. It was actually created in 2014 under the Obama administration. And really, it was kind of put in place. We call it the legal loophole because it was put in place to solve the gap or solve the issue between SSI being able to pay for something and not allowing the special needs trust to pay for things. And at the same time, solving the issue of, okay, the asset limit is only $2,000, and that hasn't been increased for inflation since like 1972. Well, $2,000, isn't that much to be able to kind of save up if you were trying to. Okay, so the ABLE account was put in place essentially to be the savings account that our children can have that will not affect their government benefits. Okay, well, just like everything with the government, there's pros and there's cons. So, it's a great tool, it's a great savings account, but we have savings limits. For example, this year, like the max contribution is $16,000, and that's the most we can put in 1 year in total. Okay, there can only be one ABLE account per individual. So it's not like we can open up a few of them if we wanted to try to save more, but we can only save that much into the account. Okay, so when people ask us, like, hey, why don't I just open an ABLE account versus doing a special needs trust? Well, temporarily that might be good because, hey, we can put a little bit of money in the ABLE account, but if something were to happen to us, we can't like leave a legacy into that ABLE account. If we have something funding that ABLE or that our legacy, we can't just leave a pile of money into that. Where the special needs trust, that's where our legacy is, we're trying to save that into. Okay. So when we always get the question of, okay, which one should I open then? Should I have a special needs trust? Should I have an ABLE account? Best way to do it is let's use both. Let's use them both to their strengths. Okay, if we can use the special needs trust as that legacy, that long-term planning, that savings tool, and we can use the ABLE account as kind of that spending account, great, let's do that. Because one of the reasons we don't want to save too much money into the ABLE account is it does have what's called the Medicaid clawback provision. Okay, meaning if we save up $50,000 into that account, and let's say that, you know, our child sadly passes away and Medicaid spent $40,000 on our child during their life, Medicaid can go in and reimburse themselves that $40,000, and then all we have left is that 10 to go to a beneficiary. Where the special needs trust, on the other hand, nobody has access to that. It would just go straight to the next beneficiary. Okay. So let's use them both to their strengths. If the ABLE account is a great spending account and we can spend it on whatever we want, and the special needs trust is where we can accumulate, grow money, and have large amounts of money for their lifetime, that's how we want to use it. Okay. And like I mentioned earlier, there's kind of that limitation on that special needs trust that, hey, we can't pay rent with it. Well, hey, guess what? The ABLE account is meant to provide anything the child could need. They've actually left that definition very, very wide open of anything the child could need. Well, child needs to pay rent. So if there's ever a month that maybe SSI can't cover it, or the money that we have won't cover our rent, hey, guess what? We can take our special needs trust, we can fund our ABLE account, and now our ABLE account can pay that rent. Okay. So that's kind of that legal loophole that we talk about of, hey, that the government couldn't fix the problem, so they said, here, just use this tool to work around it the best you can. As far as things that the special needs trust can cover, again, there's a long list of things. This isn't, by any means everything, but this is just some things that, hey, this is what it's meant to be put in place for, to provide above and beyond those government benefits for your child. Okay. One big one here is, medication and medical equipment, that if Medicare or Medicaid comes back and says, hey, we won't cover this, you have a special needs trust, that's what's going to fund it. Okay. So all these different things are things that, hey, we can make sure that when we plan right, we can build out their future to make sure that, hey, if we're no longer here, that special needs trust is well funded, ready to take care of everything. Okay. So now we have our estate plan, now we have our special needs trust, everything is good. A lot of people, when they come out of those meetings with the attorney, they kind of have this big sigh of relief of, hey, everything is done. I've got my estate plan, I've got my legacy all lined out, everything is good. Not quite. Because not everything follows the will directly to where it needs to go. Okay, there is what's called beneficiary reviews that we need to do. Okay, I will tell you the biggest place that we see this issue come into play is a family comes in, they do their entire estate plan, they come out and they're like, okay, cool, I'm good. We say, okay, well, let's take a look at things, let's make sure that we are. First place we go is the 401k or 403b. Because most of the time, the 401k is something you set up 20 years ago before your child was born. And for the beneficiary, you said, I want everything to go to my wife and then my children equally. Well, guess what? If you have $200,000 saved up in your 401k and something happens to you, and if it happens to you, and let's say you and your wife at the same time, something happens, you're in a car wreck, pass away. You have this beautiful estate plan all set up so your child doesn't get any of the assets. It all goes to the special needs trust. Except your 401k is going to look first to your wife, who's no longer there, and then be split equally to your children, or what's called per stirpes. And then it's just going to be split equally. So now your child has $100,000 in their name, which obviously is well over that $2,000 asset limit. Okay. So that's one, another major thing that we need to watch for as we're doing all of our estate planning is looking at, okay, hey, how do we make sure that everything is going to flow the right way? We've changed all of our beneficiaries on, 401ks, on our life insurance policies, all those different pieces. Okay. And then kind of even deeper down kind of that planning side, when we're looking at the beneficiaries, this is where we get to be very strategic with how we leave money to a special needs trust. Okay. And when I say strategic, I mean, let's not pay Uncle Sam any more than we have to. Okay. So for example, let's say that we have a 401k with $200,000 in it and a life insurance policy with $200,000 death benefit. If we said, okay, hey, we want to split everything equally between our two kids. And so we say, okay, hey, half of the 401k is going to go to each of you, and half of the life insurance policy is going to go to each of you. Well, that's great. Equal is good, but we just put half of a asset, being the 401k, that has never been taxed into a trust that has higher tax rates than our personal tax rates, or than our, maybe our typical child's tax rates. Okay, so, and if you guys haven't seen the trust tax rates, it very quickly gets up to a 37% tax. Okay, where that's the top tax bracket for, like us as individuals. And, we have to make, hundreds of thousands of dollars before we do that. I think it's like 15, once we hit 15 or $20,000 of income inside of a trust, we're at that 37% tax rate. Okay, so from a tax perspective, when we look at it and say, okay, hey, what money do we want to leave where? We might say, okay, hey, to our quote unquote typical child, let's leave that 401k because they can stretch it out. They're in a lower tax bracket, they can stretch it out. That life insurance death benefit that's tax-free, let's leave that into the trust, because now that $200,000 is actually $200,000, not, owing taxes on 40% of that number. Okay, so when we start being strategic with how do we want to leave the money, that's how we make sure, okay, that inheritance or those taxes are going to be less and less the more strategic we can be. Okay. And one more thing that I'll kind of say, from a sibling perspective, and this is something that my dad talked to me about when I was like 14, 15 years old. They were going through planning kind of like this, working with an advisor, building out their life plan. And the one thing that he kind of just sat down and talked to me about was that equal's never going to be equal. Okay. And, from a sibling to sibling, for my brother, they wanted to make sure that he was taken care of. They wanted to make sure that his special needs trust was fully funded, right? From me, it was more, they knew that they were going to help me, buy my first car, help me through college, help with my wedding. They had plans for me. But one of the biggest plans that my dad said was he never wanted my brother to be a financial burden on me or my future family. So to him, he told me, he's like, look, equal is not going to be equal because they had a number that they found through their planning that, hey, this is how much needs to go into that special needs trust. And we'll say it was $1 million. $1 million needs to go into this special needs trust to make sure that JD is taken care of for the rest of his life. And he will never be a financial burden on me. Okay. So what that meant was it's not going to be a 50-50 split. Okay. So $1 million is meant to go into his trust. If my parents pass away with $1,001,001, he gets $1 million to the trust, I get $1 of their legacy. If they pass away and after they won the lottery and they have $10 million, more money is not going to make my brother happy. Another Dr. Pepper and a Cowboys game is what makes JD happy. As long as he's got Cowboys every Sunday and Dr. Pepper in hand, he is a pretty happy camper. Overfunding his special needs trust is not going to make him happier. So it was more a conversation of, hey, this amount has to go into the special needs trust. The remainder is going to you. And so, I always challenge parents to kind of think of it that way too. I know that, there's, and So there's a lot of families that, hey, it needs to be equal, we want to make sure it's fair. I completely understand that argument. But I will say also, take it from a sibling that, especially now that I'm older, it does make sense that, hey, I've got my life, my family, all of that. If something were to happen and he was a financial burden, that might be more worrisome to me than, well, hey, I didn't get my 50%. Okay. So from a reviewing beneficiary standpoint, really that's where we're taking a deep dive into every asset that we own, making sure it's directed to the right path and the most efficient path that we can be saving down.
We do have a question that I think would be good now. Is there a max that can be contributed to the Special Needs Trust and ABLE account? And then also, are there fees with those?
Yep, great question. So I'll start with the Special Needs Trust. There's no upper limit. There's no contribution limit. It's a trust that can be funded however we want to fund it. Again, that's where the efficiency side comes in of we want to be strategic with how we do it, but there's no real limits on what we can put in. Okay, we actually had a family that the trust, they were out in Midland, the trust owned oil royalties. And so it was just, oil money coming into this Special Needs Trust that was generating income for the child. Okay. Now, again, from an efficiency standpoint, that was taxable income. So quickly it ran into an issue, but that's beside the point. The ABLE account, we do have limits. Again, it's the government. We have quite a few limits. One is the contribution limit every year. And this year, I'm pretty sure it's 16,000 that we can put in there. At $100,000, so let's say we saved up and it reached $100,000, then it starts counting as an asset towards the $2,000. So once we hit 102,000, now it's going to suspend our SSI payment. So they say if you have 102,000, you're not going to get your $965 a month, but you do not lose Medicaid. Okay, so that is one benefit of saving in there versus just saving like a checking account or something. You don't lose that. And then I think once it reaches 550,000, you can't make any more contributions, but it can grow. Both the Special Needs Trust and the ABLE account, you can invest. Both of them will have fees. Okay, for a Special Needs Trust, it's kind of like any investment account or anything is, if you have like a trustee managing it, then you just kind of have the management or investment fees. You can also have a corporate trustee step in and manage the whole thing, manage the investments. Typically, that's going to be a higher fee. Okay, but that's only if you need that trustee side as well. The ABLE account, I will say, we can set up ABLE accounts. Honestly, it's much more expensive if we do it. So we always send people to like either texasable.gov or any of the other ABLE accounts that you want to try to use. You can pick any state, but it's just the fees associated with that, kind of depending if you want like a debit card or, most of them have like the debit card, checkbook, different things like that you can use as well. Yeah, great questions. Was there one more part to that question, or was that it?
I think that was it.
Okay.
It was just the limits and fees for them.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, then cool. So moving on to guardianship and alternatives. So guardianship, I'm sure you guys have all heard of it before. A lot of you guys have probably heard some of the horror stories about guardianship, and I think that kind of through the school districts and stuff, it's kind of become a little bit of a bad word recently, because guardianship and conservatorship has been abused. I'm sure everybody's heard of kind of like the Britney Spears stuff that went on where her parents had conservatorship over her, took advantage of her. There's a movie on Netflix called I Care a Lot, and it talks about somebody getting guardianship over elderly people and then taking advantage and stealing all their assets. So there's bad context to it, but I will also say that, like, again, personal example, my brother, he'd give the shirt off his back to anybody that asked. He would also, if somebody came over to him and said, hey, can you sign this piece of paper so I can get this really cool new car? Sure, he's going to sign the piece of paper. Right? So guardianship for my brother was more of a protection piece to make sure that he wasn't making decisions that could, deter him or take him down the wrong path. Okay, so it's more of a kind of that guidance piece. Now, my brother has full guardianship, which means that my parents have kind of full control over everything that he does. My parents are going to listen to him most of the time, unless it's, something that they think is a bad decision. Okay. Each family, I think, is something that you should definitely explore all of the options, understand what it means. Full guardianship, again, you're kind of, maintaining the rights that you had before they were 18. Limited guardianship, financial or healthcare, just means that, hey, there are certain pieces of guardianship that we can pick and choose. You don't have to go full guardianship. If it's, hey, my child fully understands the value of $1 and they're okay managing their finances, but if the doctor walked in the room and said, hey, they have to go into surgery right now, but my child is terrified of a needle, so they're going to say, I don't want that. If you don't have that guardianship, the doctor legally has to listen to the child. Okay, or I should say young adult, they're over 18. Okay, so keep that in mind. Also, if you have like an ARD, for example, let's say that your child just turned 18, you walk into the ARD, they're having a bad day, and they say, Mom, get out of here. Dad, get out of here. I don't want you in here. Legally, again, the school system has to listen to the 18-year-old that you are not allowed in the room. Okay, so just keep that in mind as, when your child turns 18, if these are things you need to consider, have a conversation with us, have a conversation with an attorney, kind of dive into what that would look like there for you. In Texas, you do have to have an attorney, and your child will actually be appointed an attorney by the court system as well to kind of protect both sides. Okay. Cool. So now everything's figured out. We have a plan. We know exactly what we need to do. Still, 2 steps I would say are very important for us to do. One is that letter of intent that I showed you earlier. Think of this like the guidebook to your child. Everything from medications, doctors we do and do not like, our routine, school systems or things that we've tried that have worked, haven't worked, therapies, all those types of things that, again, as a parent, you just know, but maybe other people don't know. Okay. Best example I've had of that is my brother. If he misses his horse riding therapy on Friday, where he goes and he hangs out with all his friends, they all ride horses, he gets to do, just hang out at the ranch for a day. If he misses that, his next week is very rough. Okay, it's just kind of something that he needs. I know that, my parents know that. But if something happened to the 3 of us, somebody may not take him to that horse riding therapy. He may really be struggling and they can't figure out why. And he doesn't know how to tell them, I need my friends. So that is something we have in our letter of intent that just says, hey, here's his routine. Here's what he does. So that's all the kinds of things that you want to be able to, if you went out of town, leave that book with somebody and they shouldn't have to call you. They should know dietary restrictions, doctors, everything should be taken care of with that book. Okay. And if you want something to kind of get started on, again, let me know. We have that letter of intent I can send over to you guys as well. And the last step, once we have a plan, let's let people know we have a plan, especially people that are in the plan. You're going to have executors, you're going to have trustees, you're going to have guardians. Let them know that they're in the plan and kind of where they fall. If they are your very first choice to be the guardian of your child, you should probably let them know. Okay, for some of our families, that's a quick phone call to everyone involved of, hey, just want to let you know we're putting our plan together. Here's where we thought you would fit into our picture. Are you okay with that? Blah, blah, blah. For some of our families, that's we sit around the big conference room table and we explain, hey, here's what all of this looks like. Okay. And then if we really want to have fun, we have what we call our fire drill. We move mom and dad to the side of the room and we say, okay, hey, they're gone. What now? Who steps up? Who makes the first calls? What happens? And then you really get to see everybody's eyes kind of like go wide, like, oh boy, what do we do?
I think
So
that's great.
yeah, that's one big one that I think a lot of people forget, or it's kind of hard to talk about sometimes. Like I said, it can be as simple as, hey, if it's Christmas time, just hey, while you're sitting next to them eating turkey or ham, hey, just want to talk to you really quick. We're putting this stuff together. Here's where I thought you would fit in. Okay. So as far as kind of starting the process, I would say, if you guys haven't started anything or don't know where to get started, give us a call, at least have jump on a call with us to kind of just dive into where you're at. We know that it's not always the right time to work with us, but at least we can kind of help you guys figure out where you are in the process, what's going on, what you need to do, and whether that's working with us directly or us referring you to whoever you need to talk to. That's what we're here for. Okay, like I said, we do this. This is our focus. You probably saw the CHSNC after my name. That stands for Chartered Special Needs Consultant, and that's essentially means just we went back to school to learn the laws, the regulations, the tax codes, all that, to how all of this works and how we can build it into our strategies. Okay.
Cody, just a
Mhm.
real question with that designation that you're talking about. That is something that people want to look for. Should they talk to somebody else? Because you had mentioned, to be careful. So how common do you find that? How frequently? Or is that something that's rather rare?
I will say it is more rare. Across the US, there's about 500 of us.
Okay.
Okay. I think in Texas, I think there's up to maybe 20, 25. So there's more in Texas, but it is a little bit more rare. I will say it is very important. There are a lot of plans that we've seen built out by, again, very good financial planners, but they don't understand this space. They don't understand the $2,000 asset limit. They don't understand that for our child, an ABLE account is better than a 529. They don't understand that our child can get a raise when we step into retirement. So hey, maybe we want to delay taking our Social Security because our child's going to get 50% of ours while we're alive, and then they're going to get a step up when we pass away, and we want that number to be as big as possible. Okay, so there's a lot of things to keep in mind. A lot of, I would say it's very specific, but definitely, if you're working with anyone, at least have a call with us. Let's at least talk through if it makes sense, or at least make sure that you're doing the right things. Get a second opinion, just like everything else, just to make sure that hey, we're not making any mistakes in there. But yeah, I would say fairly rare, in the field. And
Well,
it's
and
the same way with attorneys as well. Finding an attorney that actually specializes in working with this space.
I think that's great that you can even double check if people think they have a great plan. That is wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I mean, if you guys have any questions or you want to just schedule a quick consultation, again, we can take 30 minutes to an hour just to dive into where you are, what you're doing, if there's anything you need help with, or even if you just have a question and you're like, hey, I just want to jump on a call real quick to just, hey, you mentioned the trust. I have this type of trust. Will that work? That's what we're here for. Let us know. My number is there. Our email is there as well. If you want to email me directly, it's cody@stonewaterplanning.com. You can email me there too. And if you guys would like to scan the QR code here, just let me know how I did on the presentation. Let April and I know what you want to hear more about. Really, I know a lot of times this presentation can really feel like drinking water through a fire hose. So if you guys, all of these steps, I have a full presentation on every single step. So if there's a section that you're like, hey, April, Cody needs to dive into SSI for an hour, let's do it. You know, let us know on that survey, email April, let us know. We'll spend, you know, a whole presentation just diving into one specific piece. Yeah, that's kind of where we'll rely on you guys to let us know what you want to hear more about. But other than that, April, I think that kind of wraps everything up for me. I appreciate you having me. I know we've got like 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
I can stay a little bit longer, but yeah, definitely I can start pulling up questions unless you had anything else that you want to make sure that
We do have a couple of questions that we received earlier in the webinar, and I just held off on them because I thought it would be good for the end. My child receives survivor benefits, but it's also disabled. My child will be graduating. Are they now supposed to apply for SSI?
Okay, let me, 1 second, let me find that one again, see if I can make sure I got all of that. Okay, my child receives survivor benefits, but also to say my child will be graduating, and now supposed to apply for SSI. If you're already receiving the SSI or the survivor benefits based on, I would assume it's your spouse's work record, then you can to get Medicaid if needed, but you're probably already getting SSDI and Medicare, which is the better of the two. So it's not necessary if you're already getting that, if that makes sense. And then, you know, that's a little bit more unique situation. So if you do want to, you know, jump on a call or email me, that may be easier as well, just so we don't get things too confused here. But it sounds like you're probably on the better option anyway.
Okay. And then we've got another one in the question and answer section. I am my grandson's legal guardian and rep payee. He's 27 and we just need help to do the best for him. So that's something, again, that you'd probably be able to do a consultation on, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I would definitely say, you know, give me a call or let's schedule a consultation at least just to dive into, okay, kind of where you guys are, what it is, you know, when you say the best for him, you know, what does that mean? You know, let's build out that plan, put it together of, hey, is he gonna live with you forever? Are we gonna live with friends? Kind of what does that look like? Really putting together that plan is really gonna be the roadmap for you to make sure that, hey, you know, we plan for the best, we don't just hope for it.
Okay. And then other than that, I don't see any other questions other than we have some comments that people will email you. And if you want to send me the template that you have for the letter of intent, I'll be glad to include that. I will be sending out a copy of the slides and a copy of this webinar presentation to everybody who registered. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
All right. Well, have a great evening.
Thanks. Bye.